Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the Thursday, September 8th, 2025 Webster Town Board Workshop. We have four presentation items tonight. We're going to switch up a little bit and start with the update on the IMA, Intermunicipal Agreement, efforts to house the stray dogs here in Webster. And Webster Police Chief Dennis Kohlmeyer is presenting. So,
thank you. So I started this approach with our three neighboring towns and with three concepts in mind. So we researched, when I say we, myself and Barb Hollins worked as a team to put this together. We spoke to Penfield, Irondequoit, and the town of Ontario. And I'll kind of go through in order. So the three categories we kind of looked at were the ability to reserve space in either their current existing capacity or any facility they were currently planning to construct or under construction. Number two was staffing, whether there was an opportunity to utilize their staffing as part of the concept or do a joint staffing model. And three, an opportunity for any capital projects moving forward to enhance the space or to build capacity. So with Penfield, they currently are building a new facility. They're currently constrained and do not have an opportunity immediately for any joint project where we're reserving space. However, in the new facility, they would be able to offer us one kennel space in the new facility. And that's with the caveat that the current planned construction doesn't meet the new Eggs and Markets code. So they have to modify their existing construction plan to accommodate that. However, they are limited there for any future expansion. The way they have it configured, it's going to be essentially enough to meet their needs with one space that they could accommodate for us. They estimated about $15,000 to reserve that space on an annual basis. If we utilize their staffing to help care for the animals, they were estimating a $52 an hour hourly rate for staffing. I'm going to leave Irondequoit for last. I'm going to go to Ontario. Ontario doesn't really work as an option for us. They have a joint system already between Williamson, Ontario, Maston, and Meriden, where they work out of Lyons. And they currently have a $4 million capital project planned to update the space in Lyons. So between staffing and travel time and the inability to reserve space there, they aren't really a feasible option. With Irondequoit, it's much more accommodating, I would say. They are currently not in compliance with Eggs and Market, but they have a planned project to become compliant. To me, there's an opportunity for a joint capital project to make that space compliant and make it functional, where we could be a joint partner with them. They have the space in their facility, I think, to accommodate the needs that we have. Staffing was more of a tentative conversation depending on how the conversation goes about the physical space. I think there's an opportunity there to have an agreement on a joint staffing model to make that a feasible option. So really what I'm bringing to the board is a recommendation that we try to pursue an IMA with Town of Irondequoit. To make that, I think, a success, I would recommend that we try to make a grant application with them for improving the facility they have. They know they have to add a containment isolation room to their facility, and I think there could be some upgrades that could grant space and also improve some safety features such as cameras and push button panic buttons and things like that for the staff that are working in those facilities. So that's the direction I'd like to go, as long as the board's okay with moving that way.
I'm fine with it. Thank you for your time you put into that, and look forward to working with Irondequoit. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Is the space available in Irondequoit, is that space available now or later once they build a new facility?
I believe that we would be able to make that space available now.
Okay.
We didn't talk about the cost of that yet at this point. When I met with Chief Peters and their animal control officer, they hadn't had that conversation with their leadership yet. But I think if we're serious about moving forward, I think we could kind of narrow that down fairly quickly.
And Penfield, you're recommending Irondequoit, but would you want to have an IMA with Penfield for the one spot in case it's needed?
I would consider that as a backup option. I think that there might be times, I think it would depend on how much space we could actually reserve in the Arundequoit facility. I mean, the benefit to Penfield is that it's much closer. So from a staffing perspective, it's much easier on our staff to get to the Penfield location, that's up Jackson Road. The Arundequoit one adds a little bit more difficulty to it, so I think that that's where it's not ideal, but it's the best option available. And if Arundequoit could accommodate 2 or 3 kennel spaces that we would be able to use, then I would be less likely to want Penfield. But if it's 1 or 2 at Arundequoit, I would maybe want to have Penfield as backup for overflows.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the $400,000 that we got from the state, with that, we have, can we not, facilitate with Arundequoit or Penfield, so we can, because we already got that grant, right? Or no?
So we had the grant, we returned that grant because it didn't, we couldn't use it in the time frame required for that grant.
Okay,
Arundequoit applied for the grant last time and wasn't successful, so they don't have a grant writing firm. They were doing it in-house. So my recommendation would be, since we were already successful once, that we utilize our resource in a joint effort with them to apply for the grant moving forward, because I think it'll
Yeah, that would
help
be
meet both of our
benefits.
needs.
Yeah.
And with Penfield, they're having new construction, but they don't have the opportunity to expand the space they're constructing, so it limits any kind of capital project.
okay, well, thank you so much. We, respect your decision, and we know that you probably, wanted to succeed in everything here for our town. So this way, it would lower the tax, for our constituents as well, so.
And I'm sorry, Chief, you might have said this. Are they able to take any dogs now?
I believe they have the space. We haven't worked out the timeline of it. I think it
Okay.
would require some sort of commitment on the IMA and
Sure.
potentially the cost of reserving the space.
Okay,
I think there's a couple of ways that could move forward fairly quickly.
okay. No, I think it sounds like a great plan, and thank you for all of your hard work and your research.
I appreciate it. Barb Hollins has been
Oh,
great.
well, and,
Yes.
yeah, thanks to Barb as well.
Yeah. So yes, thank you. Any other questions?
No, I just offline, and you had said earlier, Barb's been fantastic when you and I talked earlier, and I was glad to hear that. I also said, when you brought it up earlier to me about, could we have our grant writing firm, since Arundequoit doesn't have one, and since Barb was so instrumental in the Ags and Market grant that we got because of her ties, I think it makes sense that we utilize that again, because we pay a flat fee monthly for that grant assistance, so it's not gonna be additional, right, Maria?
Correct.
Um,
And also, we would be able to go for a higher amount on that grant because of the partnership.
You got it, and so I think, and we'll talk to Paul and legal offline, and maybe we can have you come back in a month with, because there is a parallel, like, well, do you get the framework of the IMA and, that money set first and then apply for the grant, or to expand the facility, or are you doing those in parallel? There's some details, but we'll work them out later. I think the board has said, proceed on. We're 2 months out from mid-July, when we decided not to pursue the $400,000 grant to build a kennel here. I like the progress in 2 months. I've made it very clear, Chief, the quicker your police department is not housing these dogs, the better. So, knock on wood, maybe January 1st, but we'll see. We'll have you back maybe in a month to get updates on the grant writing and where we're at on the IMA format, which I'm sure that Kyle and Paul might need to start helping.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments?
No?
No, I think it's great news, and it's gonna save an awful lot of money and solve a problem for both Arundequoit and Webster. So I like that path forward.
All right. Thanks, gang. All right, well, next up is Chris Bilo, our Parks and Rec Commissioner. He is going to present and lead a discussion on how the food truck service at Sandbar Park went this past summer, and recommendations for a possible food service concept at Sandbar Park for 2026 and beyond. So, Chris, I'm going to hand you the baton.
Okay. All right. Okay, so if you recall back just before the summer started, we sort of broached the idea of having food truck option down at Sandbar after the brick and mortar concept due to cost. That concept sort of proven itself to be not a feasible option for us. And in regards to timing, food trucks seemed like the best option for us for '25. So we moved ahead with that. If you recall, we did interviews with a number of different food trucks back in the late winter, early spring. And we started service for food trucks at Sandbar on June 1st. We wrapped up the season or the operation on September 11th was the last night. In total, there was about just over 40 days of operation where there was physically a food truck there. We did have 6 food trucks in total that provided that service over the course of the summer. A couple things that I shared at the beginning of this process that kind of played out as the summer went along. We knew that the schedule of, the weekly schedule was not going to be consistent. That's due to food truck, their schedule and their what they had already had booked, et cetera. So we knew we weren't going to have a consistent schedule. That's why we rolled the schedule out every 2 weeks with updates. The request to all the food trucks was, as the season went along, that they would let us know if there was a situation that would prevent them from being there. Again, unknown for us as we went into this is that unfortunately that doesn't always happen with food truck operators, is a lot of time the communication is after the fact. Sometimes it was known and it was shared to us, but unfortunately we did have some situations where we didn't hear until the next day that a food truck didn't show up. By our records, that happened about 4 or 5 times throughout the season. There were other times that they notified us, and we did update through social media, that a food truck that was scheduled for that evening wouldn't be there. So we tried to stay up on that schedule as best we could, but we knew that that was going to be a challenge all summer. One of the good things is right away at the beginning, the food truck operators all had expressed an interest to have more picnic tables down there along with just our regular park users. As that request, we were able to meet that both for the food truck users as well as just regular park patrons. And then finally, at the end of the season, so late August, we created a survey that we sent out to the food truck operators just to get their feedback, kind of on how they felt the season went, as well as just looking forward as possible operations down there. So what we did with the survey is we emailed it out to all of them. Again, we asked them a number of different questions, ranging from promotion to how the weather affected business to parking. Were there other things that they thought were important? So we did get 5 of the 6 vendors did submit a survey back. So we felt like we heard from just about everybody. All respondents, if you recall, felt that weather was probably the most critical. I was talking to somebody today that it's hard to believe when you think back, but June was actually an exceptionally wet season. So the start of this food truck operation was difficult for food truck operators because June was so wet, and it transitioned immediately into a hot July and August. So weather was an issue. Food trucks felt that the service was well promoted, shared within the community, so we think that everybody at least had an opportunity to find out about the service or the operation. One of the highlights of the survey showed that lack of other features was a possible reason for the lower attendance. Things like music, activities or games going on was mentioned. It'd be nice to have some passive games so people could do while they were hanging around eating their food, enjoying the weather. Alcohol sales obviously would have been another reason for people to want to participate. Competition, this I think goes back to why we had some of those cancellations. As things come up, events get scheduled throughout the summer, food truck operators know there's a guarantee. They obviously took those events, and that did affect our schedule. as I mentioned earlier, that lack of communication when trucks canceled was an issue. And then parking, even on nights when it was busy, both for food truck and just general park usage was never an issue. I was down there a number of times while there was a food truck operation, and also on nights when park was pretty busy. There were several nights when both north and south lots were just about full, but we still had on-street parking, so that was a good sign to see as well. Some of the comments, just shared these. We did ask if they wanted to write, so, several of the trucks did say, mention they do see a lot of potential in the seasonal food operation as long as it's built on consistency. Again, it was sort of a message that I shared at the beginning of this, with this venture. The idea of a seasonal food shack is definitely something we're interested in exploring. One of the operators mentioned people still have been very positive and supportive, which I think is great. I think the area is beautiful, a ton of potential, and the communication to us and the community has been A+. So some positive comments as well. So kind of the information that we pulled out of that survey and some of the feedback that we've gathered over the last, I'll say 2 years. Really the results of that survey, along with the information learned through that design and bidding phase of a brick and mortar, seem to indicate that the most practical approach is to offer consistent seasonal food service site with features such as, music, activities from that time frame of May to October. It's about 140 days, and I don't want to get into why that's important, but there is some reason why you want to stay under 180 days from a seasonal operation. So that seasonal approach does seem to work pretty well. But again, a consistent, and I'll use that word because that was the most common phrase that we did hear from our operators. A consistent operation with food and alcohol would be able to provide the community with a on-site frequent for about 5 months out of the year, so almost half the year. So this leads us into one of the features or one of the options, directions we could possibly go. And again, this is something that was mentioned at the beginning of summer. It's the storage container concept. These are obviously starting to become more prevalent in this area in places where weather is a little bit more welcoming year-round. You've seen these probably become more popular, but in this area you're starting to see these are starting to become popular. As we were talking coming in, there's a new one that just opened in Fairport or Parrington, Backwoods. So I think you're going to start to see more of these in this area, again, from a seasonal approach. So cargo texture is actually a term I learned that I've been through this process, which is the act of taking old cargo containers, repurposing them to build a more efficient and sustainable residential business or industrial building. So obviously they're typical storage containers. They can be operated as seasonal for both food and drink sales. The process is similar to what we did, as we would look for a potential restaurateur to help us operate those features. And then in order to meet the needs of having what I'll say is extra stuff or extra activities, whether it's music, those kind of things, that could actually be managed by the town if it wasn't done by the operator. So if there was music to be scheduled, the town could actually step in and help facilitate that process. Some of the benefits, obviously it's seasonal in nature. At the end of the season, containers are closed up. It does provide the flexibility, however, that if there are special events, that are quote off season, we could reopen those for a one-time event or a special event, whether it's some event in the wintertime or whatever the case may be. It does provide you that option. Cost of construction would be much less, obviously, than any brick and mortar building, which would obviously result in some sort of a lower payback to the town for the operator. It's not permanent, so if the need or the interest doesn't sustain over time, containers can be sold and relocated without major renovation to the site. You can just come in, pick them up with a lift, put them on the back of a flatbed pickup or a truck and take them away. Existing site as it is right now is actually large enough for a concept that would hold a 40-foot food operation restaurant type structure, a 20-foot bar operation, and a 20-foot stage/storage unit. That along with the tables, the chairs, propane tables, whatever it might be, for the ambiance, plenty of room for that kind of, those kind of features within that site. We have confirmed that this type of a structure does meet New York State Building Code, so we know that we can move forward, because sometimes some of these new concepts New York State's not quite as current on, so that is a positive. Drawback to it is obviously it does still require us to have a partner, although we saw through the food truck operation that some of those food truck operators, because some of those are seasonal in operation, do have an interest in working with us potentially for this. So we would sort of begin that process again, just on a different scale. Then obviously another drawback, it's not year-round, even though it does provide you the opportunity to be able to still use it in off-seasons. So I'm going to just bring this up real quick, as this has become very preliminary in some of my discussions with some of the vendors that do provide these type of structures. There are 2 different vendors that I've reached out to and had a few different conversations with. Both of the vendors provide, they're basically customizable. 20-foot, 40-foot, 40-foot is what you typically see from a restaurant size. 20-foot is typically what you see for the bar size. But again, they're fully customizable. Features can include anything you want, just based on your need. You can have walk-in coolers like you would have in a brick and mortar. You can have rooftop seating where people actually can sit on top if you want. They come with fire suppression systems, obviously, in the restaurant. You can have HVAC splits put into these, so during the season like we had, there is a way to be able to cool the inside. So they're very customizable. Both vendors had a number of different features that they offer and provide. So again, costs that I have on here are truly just estimates. Obviously, as we go through a process, if that's the direction we go, costs kind of get solidified based on, again, those needs or those interests of what the what features are on those units. Typically, base models include things such as obviously doors, service windows, counters, flooring, the electrical panels, hand sinks, 3 base sinks, the common restaurant type of features. So the 2 vendors that I've spoke to are, the first one is called Box Pop. Cost for these, for like a 40-foot, a 20-foot, and a 20-foot storage stage area for all the items is around $350,000. So they're still, it's not cheap. However, they fully are equipped with your basic features. Obviously, if you look to go, you want to go with, heavier duty items, or you want to go with things such as, the rooftop seating. Some of those kind of features, your costs are obviously going to go up, but just for a general, startup cost, that's about where you're at. The other company, which is a little bit more customizable in regards to what they provide, as well as they also have what I've phrased as sort of a phase approach in how this works, is Roxbox. So again, same system, a 40-foot food service, 20-foot bar, 20-foot storage area. It's a little bit less, about $320. Roxbox has a little bit more to their base package. But again, they have a phase approach that actually allows you to kind of work through it like you would any construction, as you go through the phases of, site drawings and sketch drawings, and then you can make additions and changes to it. So those are the 2 vendors that I've spoken to directly. Those are the ones that I'll say on a national scale you tend to see are have the most number of units. Roxbox has a number of different units in Wilmington, North Carolina, that I took a look at in a food service area that's similar to what we're looking at, only on a little bit larger scale, but just the same type of concept. So what I'm requesting of the board is that we approach this from a design concept, whether or not we work with Roxbox or we go to some sort of a construction management company to help, ensure the aspects of the design, those kind of things are done, so we can get some firm costs in regards to what the actual cost may be. At the same time that's going on, begin the process of looking at a seasonal operator. determine what type of services and features should be provided, and then get into that seasonal agreement for the operator. And then I had there are a few photos on the last page. I don't know if you have it in color. My copy that came through in black and white didn't show, but there are a couple examples of about 20-foot, which is those top two, the bar box as well as the one on the left. Then down on the bottom, the Bradley's, that's a 40-foot restaurant operation. And then the one on the bottom is two 40-foot operations as well. And those are all between either Roxbox or Pop Box.
Could we have a question now, or?
Yep, so now that's the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation. And I have a couple questions. Who has the liability for the sale or the consumption of the alcohol that used, on our town property?
It would fall on the vendor.
Okay. And also shouldn't it be better that we just build like a pavilions or, a cottage so that we can just rent out for people if they want to use it? Like at Charlie Sexton or Liberty Lodge, things like that. Would that be better?
You mean
First,
a lot?
A lodge, yes. Then to have a restaurant or to have, food there that we already spent a lot of money on the Sandbar Park already. And, I think it's a good idea that you presented, but the park looks wonderful right now, and it just, to me, it should be, leave it alone the way it is, instead of spend more money.
So to answer your question on a lodge, so this concept is not at all in line with, building a lodge or any type of facility that's rentable, whether it's like Liberty or at Curry. This concept is strictly for a food service concept. If the town board decides to go in a different direction, obviously that's a totally different operation. Whether or not that site can even sustain a lodge, a rentable lodge, could be questionable, especially based on the size of the building and what type of an event is going on there. You may have some issues with just general park usage along with.
Or maybe just like an open lodge, It's not,
Oh,
doesn't
you're
have to
talking
be
an
all.
open shelter?
Yes, open shelter is,
Okay.
it's not to have to be enclosed.
Okay.
I'm just using an example of Liberty Lodge because, it's happened to in my head, so.
An open shelter is totally different. We don't rent open shelters, so if the town board decides that they just want to put a shelter in there, it's obviously an option, doesn't meet the food service piece, but if that's the direction that the town board, chooses to go, then there's always that option that you could put an open pavilion in there, just have picnic tables underneath it, and, it's a sort of a first come, first serve as, we have at Sexton.
Yeah, it's just that I feel uncomfortable with right now with all the time and the money that we're spending so far on the projects.
Hey, Chris, thanks to you for, bringing this to the board. I got a couple questions as far as the drawings go, to come up, the conceptual drawings. Who's paying for that, and what's the cost?
We haven't done any conceptual drawings to this.
Well, I know, but you're going to, right?
Right,
That's
potentially
the direction
we
you're
will.
asking to go, right?
Correct.
So what's the cost to that?
So if we went with this, as I shared in that last slide, for that phased approach, the first
Yeah.
phase is like a $3,500 fee. And that gets you basically to start the process, your initial concept. And then the second phase is the final drawings, along with things like the electrical information. And that's like an $11,000 phase two. So for the if you went with that second vendor, you would be looking at about a $15,000 construction drawing process. Now, the town probably should also have, whether it's a construction management oversee that, or because You know, the connection to the gas lines and water lines, that's obviously not part of that, those costs. That would be on the town, so that process would also need to be followed. So to answer your question, John, I don't have a cost for what it's gonna cost for us to design this. That's sort of the next step.
Yeah, I'd like to get that number. You're estimating it at, what, probably
That's for the
20,000?
design of the two boxes.
Okay.
Jennifer?
Well, first of all, I appreciate the Parks and Recreation Department going out and working with the food trucks to actually have something down there this summer and start to get a feel for the atmosphere and who was coming down and how that space was being used. I went down there, had a nice meal, sat at a picnic table, talked to some people. It was nice to be able to enjoy the space that way. So I think it is a wonderful first step in seeing that there is a need. We're in the very early stages of the comprehensive plan, and we had a meeting yesterday to talk about some of the community feedback. And not surprisingly, the Bayside and having food at Sandbar Park was one of the things that is on the list that the community desires very much. It would be nice to have a restaurant down there that could be open year-round and, you know, has all of the things that it used to have, and we went through that process and it was way too much money. So you start with the food trucks, you graduate to these containers which have their own type of ambiance to them, like that backwoods place. So I haven't been there, but I've seen pictures of it. It seems like a neat thing to do. It's a very neat, up-and-coming, sustainable type of concept.
Correct.
And it doesn't have the same cost as a permanent structure. And the money that it would cost to go through the planning and build it is clearly, at some point, gonna be offset by the vendor who's gonna pay rent to operate out of that space. And so there's gonna be some revenue coming into the town. And like Chris said, if it doesn't work, you just sell it, as opposed to having a building there that's a restaurant that is empty and not occupied. So I think it's worthy of pursuing this a little further to understand what the cost would be and what the design and concept, to get a more concrete number on that, and then make a decision on how to move forward. It would be nice to have something sooner versus later, because these things take time. It would be nice for it to actually be down there for next summer. Yeah, and something like this would be very doable to move forward with quickly if that's how we chose to proceed. So I think it is worthy of moving forward. The comprehensive plan is coming together, so it's almost like these two things can come together at the same time. So yes, we need information on what it would cost. So I hear you, Ginny, I hear you, John. You know, it's not like, hey, here's a blank check. Yes, this is great. Go spend $350,000, $400,000, $500,000 on a container tomorrow. But it's definitely worth pursuing. And you know what? If it is a success, so Chris mentioned if it's not a success, you can just take it and sell it. If it is a success, you can take it and sell it and say, you know what? Now we have a viable business operation down here. And the next step would be to graduate to a full-scale permanent building restaurant that somebody may, after they operate a food truck for a while, be more interested in a full-time operation down there. And maybe we can build a permanent structure that is not $3 million, but more, you know, commensurate with maybe it needs to be a smaller building. Maybe it doesn't have to have all the features that the Soccer Sam's building had. So it's a phased approach. I like it. People are very sad about the Bayside. They remain very sad about the Bayside. And a lodge or a pavilion will not meet the needs of the community.
I know, but don't forget, the comprehensive plan is not going to be, complete until 2027. So are we talking about building this right now with the?
We're moving
the food-
forward with the cost. We're not building anything because it's like a container. So if
Yeah, but then
somebody,
what if it's fell?
I'm
Like,
sorry?
What if it's fell? You say that, if it's success, then it's perfect, right? But then what if we spend all this money and then it's failed? And then
Then
what?
we sell
Then-
it.
Then who's going to buy it if it's fell?
But anybody would buy it. Anybody can buy it.
We don't know, right? It's a what if. So I think the best solution is right now is perfect the way, to me, it's perfect the way it is. And for us to use that money to towards something else that's more beneficial for our town. I mean, it's just my personal opinion.
That's okay.
It's 7:05, so this section stops at 7:10, and I appreciate what everybody has asked and said. Patty, do you have any comments, questions?
Well, I think Jennifer certainly mentioned all of the things that we could possibly discuss on the list. Personally, I think it's a great idea, and the community has been asking for something down there. The success of the food truck service clearly shows that there is a desire, I hate to call it a need, but a desire by the community to have something like this, and I think it's something that we can expand on beyond the food piece of it. The ability to have concerts, the ability to have cornhole or whatever it might be down there so that people can enjoy the park. When we talk about building things, let's not forget all the roadblocks we ran into with the DEC and the site and everything else. There's not a lot of space where we can be building permanent structures down there. I think it's a great idea, and I think that we should move ahead and explore what the costs would be. And certainly, Chris, you're not going to run off and do anything without bringing it back to the board first.
Yeah, this is, so, exactly. This is basically just to, see if this is the direction that we want to move. If the town decides that, yeah, this is the direction that we, at least investigate into to find out, is this even doable from a finance standpoint? If we find out that the process to go through, to build one of these and meet our needs is going to end up costing the town $500,000, then the town board probably going to say, no, we don't want to do that. But if the town board comes back and, or the costs come back and it's at $350,000 for, everything that we need that would meet, as Jennifer said, what everybody has been asking for since this park is reopened, then that's going to be a decision up to the town board.
And I'll tell you what, I'm going to get with Chris and actually Paul and Kyle offline, see if we can bring back on October 2nd a resolution and maybe about authorizing the spending of the however many thousands of dollars it is on the design. There's devil in the details of that. I got to get with Paul. Procurement policy. Is this a professional
Right.
service?
We haven't
Is this
even gone down that
we
path
haven't
yet.
gone down that.
Correct.
So I'll get with Kyle and this and that. I appreciate absolutely what Jenny is saying about just leave it as is. As an option. I will say this: a lodge. We all need to remember that part of the $3 million cost of that 2,400 square foot building that had 20 bidders on it, it's the robust bidding, right? $3,750,000 is because the DEC is making us put a foundation in for a permanent building that has helical pilings. Now, I would assume that a lodge would have that same mandate, right? The DEC doesn't care. That was going to be a town-owned building. Whether it's a town-owned building that was going to be run by a private restaurateur or a lodge, $750 out of the gate to get the foundation. So one of the things we were trying to do with this is how do you come up with something that DEC says is not a permanent building? And I think it's important to understand that as Chris and I went through this with the last 4 years with different vendors, and especially the guys who ran the Bayside, they made it very clear. 85 to 90% of their revenue was during that June 1st to September 15th. They kept it open, and it was kind of, this is where people said, oh, we need something that we can go into in December. That's nice and that's quaint. I get that. But anything you can go into in December, I can't fathom something that's not a permanent building. And the permanent building starts at 750 before you go above the ground.
We don't have to have
Where this-
anything at all.
Where this is gonna be something that potentially, if we move forward in the vetting process and start to do things. So I will get with Paul, Kyle, and Chris if we have to come back and do another presentation on October 2nd to grease the skids for October 2nd potential vote to start design or whatever. We will look at that. And I want to thank you, Chris.
Chris, where did you say these containers are located? In Fairport has
There's a
one?
brand new one that just opened. There's a brand new one that just opened in Fairport, Parrington. It's
Fairport
called-
and Parrington?
Yeah.
No, it's one or the other. It's,
I think
whether it's Fairport, Parrington, I don't know exactly which line it falls into, but it's called Backwoods.
Correct.
It's on a trail,
Backwoods.
you can actually
Yeah.
hike
Hiking
and
trail.
get to it, or you can park in a parking lot and get to it. It would.
So offline, we'll get that all to you,
Wait.
John.
Awesome.
So we'll get
Thanks.
that all to you.
Yeah.
Yep.
7:10, we are with the third one to stay on pace.
Chris.
We are,
That
got
was
an
great.
update on proposed code changes, and I'm gonna hand the baton to Josh Artuzo, our Director of Community Development. The baton is yours, Josh. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Now, I will say, as you set up there, the next two presentations have correlating resolutions on the regular town board meeting tonight. So just queuing that up.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to give a brief recap. I was last here approximately 5.5 months ago, if you could believe that, to give a presentation with our code enforcement officer, Husto, on some proposed property maintenance code updates that we were seeking to help us deal with some very commonly complained about issues around town. So, as you can see on the left, initial presentation was April 3rd. Just to refresh everyone's memory, the topics that were covered during that presentation involved our code enforcement procedures. Currently, we do not have any formal procedures codified in town code, and we're looking to really capture our official process in the town code, which I will get into a little bit further detail. One new element that I will also elaborate further on the presentation is a particular section in our building construction chapter. Also on-street parking restrictions, storage of vehicles on private property, and then a provision that deals with portable storage containers, roll-off dumpsters, and dumpster bags. So the original plan was, we didn't anticipate this length of time going by in between the initial presentation and the request to hold the public hearing. But as often happens when you start peeling back codes, they're often linked to other sections of code, and you want to make sure that you're not basically creating things that conflict with one another. So it was a larger effort than we had originally anticipated, and there was a lot of work done internally with the staff of my department, as well as legal advice from our town attorney. So I do appreciate all the assistance that we've had so far. So just to recap, the code enforcement procedures that we're looking to be having inserted into our town code as a new chapter. Basically, the complaint begins basically by receiving some correspondence from residents, either through phone, walk-ins to town hall, emails, etc., and of course, staff observations. So when we become aware of a potential code violation, we do a site inspection to confirm if the reported violation is in fact rising to the level of a violation. If we do confirm that we believe a violation exists, then the official process begins, which is really 4 steps. It starts with a initial correspondence that we refer to as a violation letter, just alerting the property owner that we've been made aware of a potential violation and asking them to give us a call to work out a plan to help resolve it. The majority of folks do respond to that initial reach out, and by and large, we are able to achieve compliance voluntarily. For those that do not respond, after approximately a week to 10 days, we send out another correspondence that we refer to as a notice and order. The language is a little bit stronger, and it contains a particular date, with reasonable time given that we expect it to be remedied. If we haven't heard from a property owner after that step, we then go to an appearance ticket that gets served to the property owner, and that essentially summons them to an upcoming court date where the matter will be presented before the town judge. The piece of from our building construction, chapter 119, involves the issuance of temporary certificates of occupancy. For those that may not be familiar with that term, a temporary C of O allows for occupancy of a building or structure prior to all of the project components being 100% complete. Now, obviously, the bare minimum requirements of fire and life safety, fire prevention systems, mandatory ingress and egress routes, those are all still required, even under a temporary C of O. They are issued on rare occasions for good cause only. I think in the last 5.5 years, we've had 1 request for a temporary C of O. But what we found when comparing our code to other like-sized towns is that our code requires the town board to approve a temporary certificate of occupancy, and it's only good for a period of 30 days. So as I mentioned, we did an analysis of actually all 19 towns in Monroe County and confirmed that we are the only one that requires town board approval. All of the other towns issue temporary C of Os administratively by either the code enforcement official or the building inspector. And by and large, most of them are good for a period of 6 months rather than 30 days. So in an attempt to bring our code more in line with common practice, the proposed change involving this chapter would have any request for a temporary certificate of occupancy to be administratively issued by the Commissioner of Public Works and the building inspector based upon their professional areas of expertise. Now, we currently don't have the title of Commissioner of Public Works, so there is a provision explaining in the event of the absence of that position, it would then require the unanimous approval of the different division heads that essentially make up the Department of Public Works. So a temporary C of O under this proposed code would be good for a period of 6 months, and it would only allow 1 3-month extension. There's some language in there that would require anyone requesting this to provide financial security to the town to ensure that there is timely completion of the project. They would also have to provide a list of items that are remaining to be complete with a firm timeline of when the completion is expected to take place. And then we added some language that if at any point during that temporary C of O period that a dangerous condition or a threat to public safety came about, that the town would have the ability to revoke or rescind that temporary C of O.
Josh, we're going to have a halftime on this, okay? Because there is a resolution to set a public hearing tonight, I'm going to make an executive decision so we can start the regular board meeting on time at 7:30. We're going to have you pick up the rest of this presentation before we vote on that public hearing. And we will allow at the 7:30 meeting,
Okay.
we will allow the town board members to ask questions. That's what we're going to do. We're not going to bleed into starting the town board meeting at 7:40. So, with that in mind, Rick and Paul, you are up at 7:20, and you are up for our last workshop item tonight, an update on renewable energy, a potential project that could happen down at the sanitary sewer plant. And this ties into, on August 21st at a workshop, Bob Wimmer from Navitas was here and presented to the board when Patty was overseeing that board meeting. So, gents, I'm handing the baton to you.
Yeah, we're just basically reviewing the anticipated timeline for the RNG project. As Tom just said, they were on August 21st. Rick, I don't know if you have any comments, but
Is there any way we can get up on the screen the presentation for this workshop? It's one page, so that'll be nice.
Bob Wimmer did do a presentation. Essentially, they're proposing that we do an add-on to the capital project, which you're projecting might cost about $8.8 million, but it may result in tax credits to the IRS of about $14 million. So it would actually net down to actually save us on the overall project costs. So the next timeline item is today. Basically, we contacted Freed Maxick, which is a CPA firm, which is now known as Witham, and they provided us with a proposal for services. To basically, they gave us a proposal for the whole thing, but we would like to just address the first item, where they would do a safe harbor memo assessing the viability of the project. They had an estimated cost of $35,000 to $40,000 for that piece, and there's actually a resolution on the agenda tonight for that one. So, that will take them like 6 to 8 weeks to complete.
Actually, 4 to 6.
Yeah, so if everything goes well, on November 6th, Witham will have their report, and we'll probably have them in for a town board workshop to discuss the results. And at that point, we should know whether it looks like a go to proceed with the project. Basically, the probability that we'll actually get the tax credits should be at hand.
Now, this timeline kind of speaks for itself, but Navitas, we've spoken to them. They think it's going to take 3 to 4 months for them to do an accurate design and engineering, 30, 60, 100% drawings of this project. And they are ready to come here if November 6th is when we're assessing the Witham report.
Correct.
And at the same time, if the Witham report looks like a thumbs up, this is viable for this credit, then we would have the Navitas people say, well, here is how much we think it will cost, or what it will cost to design and engineer, and that's where we pick up at the town board meeting, where we would potentially be voting on a resolution to authorize the supervisor to sign the contract to do the engineering. Not to cut in,
Right.
but I think those are
Correct.
key
So
components of
There's
this.
potentially a resolution on November 6th for the town board to agree to move forward with the Navitas engineering and design. Then that would take 3 or 4 months, so somewhere around the end of February or the beginning of March, Navitas will present on the proposed RNG construction cost and the schedule. The town supervisor will be authorized to amend, to sign the amendment number 4 to the contract, to the Navitas contract, to add the RNG project.
I want to, and I'm so
But-
sorry, Paul, I feel very rude.
No, go
There is
ahead.
no way at that meeting that there will be a resolution to amend the contract to have the new supervisor do that. What is in this timeline is that we would, whoever is the supervisor in town board would start the process of setting public hearings, and it's a kind of list of various resolutions that would probably cascade through. And that's why it says, really, then the March 19th, April 2nd, town board meetings to carry out the sequence of resolutions that were started on February 19th, March 5th. But I want to make sure everybody understands there is not a possibility in the world that we would be, or whoever is the supervisor in town board, ready on February 19th or March 5th to authorize the supervisor to sign an amendment for 8.8 million to the contract, because many things have to happen prior to that in this sequence, including a public hearing to amend the bond, blah, 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 blah. So, very critical that that is understood.
Before we get too much farther in this, because I think to some folks who might be watching, it sounds like we are fast-tracking this, and nothing could be further from the truth. The supervisor was not present at that meeting, and I think what I heard loud and clear from my fellow board members was that we thought this project had potential and could really benefit the town, but we had many questions, and we're looking for something as close to a guarantee as we could get that this would be eligible for these tax credits. And what we heard from Paul was that we needed to get with Freed Maxick, who we now found has merged with Witham, for us to give us that assurance that this project would qualify. So that's really what we're looking at tonight.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep,
That is correct.
that is correct.
So not to, if we're going to start at 7:30, we will pick this up. Well, I'll explain it when we start the regular board meeting of how I will queue up the two resolutions tonight that tie to Josh's presentation, which he still needs to finish on the code changes, and Rick and Paul's on the RNG and Witham and all that. So this officially concludes the workshop for the evening.